Maya Chen had always believed in doing the right thing. It was how her parents raised her, how she lived her life, and how she approached her work. But on that Tuesday evening in late September, she discovered that sometimes figuring out what the right thing actually is can be the hardest choice you'll ever make. The office was quiet. Most people had left hours ago, heading home to their families or out to meet friends for dinner. Maya was still there, like she often was, sitting at her desk on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Tower in downtown Chicago. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the city lights starting to twinkle as the sun set behind the buildings. It was beautiful, but she barely noticed. She had work to do. Maya worked as an executive assistant to Robert Hayes, the CEO of Brightline Marketing Group. It wasn't just any job. She had worked hard to get here, putting herself through business school while working 2 other jobs, sending money home to help her parents, and slowly, painfully, chipping away at her student loans. This position paid well, had good benefits, and had given her a stability she'd never known growing up. More than that, she was good at it. Really good. Robert was the kind of boss people wrote about in business magazines. Charismatic, brilliant, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. He'd built Brightline from nothing into one of the most respected marketing firms in the country. He remembered everyone's names, asked about their families, and had a way of making you feel like the most important person in the room when he talked to you. Maya had learned so much from him in the 3 years she'd worked there. She respected him, trusted him. That's why what she found that evening hit her so hard. The board meeting was scheduled for the next day. It was a big one, the kind where major decisions got made about the company's future. Robert had asked Maya to organize all the quarterly reports, financial projections, and presentation materials. Everything needed to be perfect. She'd been working on it all week, making sure every detail was exactly right. Around 7 in the evening, Maya realized she needed a specific file from the shared network drive. It was a folder that contained background research on a potential client. She typed in the folder name and waited for it to load, but something went wrong. Instead of the client research folder, her screen showed a different directory entirely, a private folder she'd never seen before. Maya's finger hovered over the mouse, ready to click back. This was clearly a mistake. Private files weren't her business. But then she saw the names in the email preview pane, and her heart skipped a beat. Robert's name. And next to it, the name of Jessica Park, a junior account manager who'd joined the company about 8 months ago. She should have closed it. She knew she should have closed it right then and there, but something made her pause. Maybe it was the odd feeling she'd had lately, the way Robert's behavior had changed over the past few months. The unexplained afternoon meetings, the times his door was closed when it normally would be open, the way he seemed distracted during important calls. Maya clicked on the first email, then the second, then the third. Her stomach twisted into knots as she read. These weren't work emails. They were personal, intimate, the kind of messages that should only exist between 2 people who were involved with each other. But Robert was married. He had 2 kids. She'd met his wife, Anne, at company events. Anne was kind and warm, always, asking Maya about her family, treating her like more than just an employee. The emails went back months. There were promises in them, too. Robert had told Jessica she'd be promoted to senior account manager by the end of the year. He'd said he'd make sure she got the best projects, the biggest clients. In one email, he mentioned helping her get into an exclusive industry conference that other junior employees could only dream about attending. Maya felt sick. This wasn't just an affair. This was a superior using his position to influence someone who worked under him. It was the kind of thing that destroyed careers, ended marriages, and brought down entire companies. If this got out, if the board found out, Robert would be finished. And it wouldn't just affect him. The scandal would hurt everyone at Brightline. Stock prices would tank. Clients would leave. People would lose their jobs. People like Maya. She sat back in her chair, her hands shaking slightly. The office suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. Outside, the city continued its evening routine, completely unaware that Maya's entire world had just shifted on its axis. What was she supposed to do with this information? The obvious answer seemed simple at first. Report it. Tell HR. Tell the board. Let them handle it. That's what the company handbook would say. That's what the right thing would be. But Maya's mind raced through the consequences. If she reported this the night before the board meeting, it would be chaos. The meeting would be canceled. An investigation would start immediately. Robert would know she'd found the emails. And even if the company tried to handle it quietly, these things never stayed quiet. Someone would leak it. It would be in the news. Brightline's reputation would be destroyed. And what about her? Would she be protected? Would she be seen as a hero or a troublemaker? In her experience, whistleblowers rarely got the happy ending people imagined. More often, they got pushed out. Quietly, professionally, but pushed out nonetheless. Companies didn't like people who knew too much about their dirty secrets, even if those people were just trying to do the right thing. Maya thought about her parents. Her father's medication was expensive. Her mother needed new glasses she kept putting off buying. Maya sent them money every month. She couldn't afford to lose this job. She couldn't afford to be blacklisted in the industry, but it wasn't just about money. Maya thought about Ann Hayes, about Robert's 2 kids. They were innocent in all this. Did they deserve to have their lives blown apart because Maya made a phone call tonight? And what about Jessica? Yes, she'd made a terrible choice getting involved with her boss, but she was only 26 years old. Young and probably naive about how these things worked. A public scandal would destroy her career before it even really started. Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about all the times Robert had been good to her. The Christmas bonus that had allowed her to pay off her credit cards. The time he'd let her take a week off when her father was in the hospital, with full pay, no questions asked. The recommendation letter he'd written that had helped her get accepted into a leadership training program. Did she owe him loyalty? Or did she owe the truth to everyone else? She opened her eyes and looked at the screen again. The emails were still there, damning and clear. She had maybe 12 hours before the board meeting. 12 hours to decide what kind of person she wanted to be. Maya had never thought of herself as someone who would cover things up. She'd always believed in honesty and transparency and doing things the right way. But sitting there in that empty office, she realized that real life was messier than the principles she'd been raised with. Real life had nuance. Real life had consequences that affected real people. She thought about what would actually happen if she stayed silent. Robert and Jessica would continue their affair. Maybe it would end on its own eventually. Maybe it wouldn't. But at least the decision would be theirs to make or face later. At least dozens of innocent people wouldn't lose their jobs because of choices 2 people made in their personal lives. Was that rationalization? Was she just making excuses because taking action felt too hard, too risky? Maya didn't know. She genuinely didn't know. What she did know was that she was exhausted. She'd been at work for 12 hours. Her mind was spinning. And she had to make a decision that would affect more lives than just her own. She looked at the clock. 7:45. Security would be making their rounds soon. If she was going to do anything, she needed to do it now. Maya's fingers moved almost without her conscious control. She opened a new folder on her personal USB drive. She copied the emails, every single one of them. Then she went back to the shared drive and deleted the entire folder. She cleared it from the trash. She checked the backup logs and found a way to remove the automated backup that would run at midnight. It wasn't perfect, but it would make the emails much harder to find. Finally, she closed everything and sat in the darkness of her office, her heart pounding. She'd just destroyed evidence. She'd just actively covered up something that could be seen as harassment or abuse of power. She'd crossed a line she'd never thought she'd cross, but she'd also given Robert a chance to end things quietly, a chance to fix his mistakes without destroying everyone around him, a chance to be better. Maybe that made her naive. Maybe it made her an accomplice. Or maybe it just made her human. Maya gathered her things, turned off her computer, and headed for the elevator. As she rode down 42 floors, she looked at her reflection in the polished metal doors. She looked the same as she had that morning. But she felt different. She felt like someone who now understood that the right choice isn't always the obvious one. When she stepped out into the Chicago evening, the cool September air hit her face. The city was alive with people heading to restaurants, catching trains home, living their normal lives. Maya pulled her coat tighter and started walking toward the subway station. Tomorrow was the board meeting. Tomorrow Robert would present his quarterly reports and strategic plans. Tomorrow his rival executives would be looking for any weakness to exploit. And tomorrow, Maya would know whether she'd made the right choice or the biggest mistake of her career. She touched the USB drive in her pocket. The evidence was there if she needed it. But for now she'd given Robert Hayes something precious and dangerous: her silence and her trust. The question was, what would he do with it? Maya barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those emails. She kept thinking about what she'd done, questioning whether she'd made the right choice. By the time her alarm went off at 6 in the morning, she'd probably gotten 3 hours of sleep at most. She dragged herself out of bed, took a long shower, and tried to pull herself together. The face staring back at her in the bathroom mirror looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes that her makeup could only partially hide. She put on her best navy suit, the one she saved for important days. If there was ever a day she needed to look professional and put together, it was today. The subway ride to the office felt longer than usual. Maya kept her hand in her coat pocket, feeling the USB drive she'd transferred there from her purse. The evidence? Her insurance policy, or maybe her ticket to unemployment. She wasn't sure which yet. When she arrived at Sterling Tower, the morning rush was just beginning. People crowded into the elevators, clutching their coffee cups and checking their phones. Maya rode up to the 42nd floor in silence, surrounded by coworkers who had no idea that she'd spent last night deleting files that could bring down their entire company. She got to her desk at 7:30, a full hour before Robert usually arrived. She needed time to compose herself, to make sure everything was ready for the board meeting at 10. The presentation files were all organized. The printed copies of the reports were stacked neatly in the conference room. Everything looked perfect on the surface. But Maya's hands were shaking as she made herself a cup of coffee in the break room. She spilled sugar on the counter and had to wipe it up quickly before anyone saw. "Get it together," she told herself. "You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." At 8:15, she heard the elevator doors open. Heavy footsteps walked down the hallway. Robert was early. That wasn't like him. Usually he strolled in around 9, relaxed and confident. But today, his footsteps sounded different. Faster, more urgent. Maya looked up as Robert passed her desk. He looked terrible. His tie was slightly crooked, something she'd never seen before. His usually perfect hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it. There were lines around his eyes that seemed deeper than yesterday. "Morning, Maya," he said. But he didn't meet her eyes. He went straight into his office and closed the door. Maya sat very still. Did he know? Had he somehow found out about the deleted files? Or was he just stressed about the board meeting? She tried to focus on her work, answering emails and confirming that all the board members would be attending. But she kept glancing at Robert's closed door. It stayed closed for over an hour. No calls, no requests for coffee. Just silence. At 9:30, Maya couldn't take it anymore. She walked to his door and knocked softly. "Robert, the meeting starts in 30 minutes. Do you need anything?" There was a pause. Then his voice came through the door, rough and tired. "Come in, Maya." She opened the door and stepped inside. Robert was standing by the window, looking out at the city below. He didn't turn around when she entered. "Are the materials ready?" he asked. "Yes, everything's set up in the conference room." "Good. That's good." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Maya, can I ask you something?" Her heart started pounding. "Of course. Do you think I'm a good person?" The question caught her completely off guard. She'd expected him to ask about files or presentations or meeting notes, not this. Yes, I do," she said carefully. "You've built an incredible company. You treat people well. You..." But do good people make bad choices? He interrupted, still not looking at her. Maya didn't know how to answer that. Was he talking about the affair? Did he know she knew? She decided to play it safe. Everyone makes mistakes, she said quietly. What matters is what you do after. Robert finally turned around. He looked at her directly, and Maya saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear. If someone close to you knew you'd done something wrong, he said slowly, something that could hurt a lot of people if it came out, would you want them to tell you? Or would you want them to just handle it quietly? Maya's throat went dry. He knew. He had to know. But how? She'd been so careful. I think, she said, choosing her words like she was walking through a minefield, that sometimes giving someone the space to fix their own mistakes is kinder than forcing them to face public judgment. But that person has to actually want to fix things, not just hide them. Robert studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You're wise beyond your years, Maya. I don't tell you that enough. Before she could respond, his desk phone rang. It was the front desk announcing that the board members were arriving. Showtime, Robert said, but there was no enthusiasm in his voice. He straightened his tie, ran a hand through his hair, and headed for the door. Maya followed him to the conference room. The board meeting started normally enough. 10 people sat around the long mahogany table, including Robert. There were the board members, the CFO, the head of HR named Patricia Williams, and a few other senior executives. Maya sat in her usual spot in the corner, ready to take notes and pull up any files that might be needed. Robert went through his presentation smoothly. He talked about quarterly earnings, new client acquisitions, and strategic plans for expansion. The board members nodded and asked questions. Everything seemed fine. Then, about 40 minutes into the meeting, one of the board members spoke up. His name was Douglas Chen, and he was known for being ruthless. He'd been trying to push Robert out for years, wanting his own candidate to take over as CEO. Before we move on, Douglas said, leaning back in his chair with a slight smile, I think we need to discuss some concerns about workplace conduct. The room went very quiet. Maya felt her pulse spike. Robert's expression didn't change. What concerns would those be, Douglas? I've received some interesting information, Douglas continued, clearly enjoying himself. Information about certain relationships that might not be entirely appropriate. Relationships between superiors and subordinates, the kind of thing that could create liability issues for the company. Maya watched Robert's hand tighten on his pen. The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Patricia from HR looked alarmed. That's a serious accusation, Robert said, his voice level. Do you have any evidence of this, or are you just spreading rumors? Douglas smiled wider. I have sources, reliable sources who have seen concerning behavior. I think it warrants an immediate investigation. This was it. This was the moment Maya had been dreading. If Douglas had evidence, if someone else had copies of those emails, then everything Maya had done last night was for nothing. Robert would be exposed. The company would implode. But something about the way Douglas was talking made Maya think he was bluffing. He kept saying sources and information, but he wasn't being specific. He hadn't mentioned names or dates or emails. He was fishing, trying to get Robert to panic and admit something. Maya made a split-second decision. She stood up from her corner seat. Excuse me, she said, and every head in the room turned to look at her. Executive assistants didn't usually speak up during board meetings. I apologize for interrupting, but I think there may be some confusion. Douglas frowned. This doesn't concern you, Ms. Chen. Actually, it does, Maya said, keeping her voice steady even though her heart was hammering. I handle all of Robert's communications and scheduling. If there were inappropriate relationships, I would know about them. I have access to his emails, his calendar, everything, and I can assure you there's nothing concerning in any of his records. It wasn't exactly a lie. There was nothing in his records anymore. Maya had made sure of that. Is that so? Douglas said skeptically. And you've reviewed everything thoroughly? I have. Maya said, looking him straight in the eye. Just last night, actually. I was organizing files for this meeting and went through all the recent communications. Everything is completely professional. Patricia from HR jumped in. If there are specific allegations, Douglas, you need to bring them forward properly. We have a process for these things. You can't just make vague accusations in a board meeting. Douglas looked frustrated. He'd clearly expected to drop this bomb and watch Robert squirm, but Maya's intervention had thrown him off balance. Fine, he said curtly. I'll submit a formal complaint to HR. We'll see what an official investigation turns up. You do that, Robert said calmly, though Maya could see the tension in his shoulders. I welcome any investigation. I have nothing to hide. The meeting continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Douglas kept shooting suspicious looks at both Robert and Maya. The other board members seemed uncomfortable, but the immediate crisis had been averted. When the meeting finally ended 2 hours later, Maya's legs felt weak. She'd just lied to the board of directors. She'd used her position to provide cover for behavior that was definitely wrong. She'd crossed another line. Robert caught her arm as she was leaving the conference room. My office, now. Maya followed him, her stomach in knots. As soon as the door closed behind them, Robert turned to face her. You knew, he said. It wasn't a question. Maya didn't see any point in denying it. Yes, how long? I found the emails last night. Robert closed his eyes. And you deleted them? Yes. Why? His voice cracked slightly. Why would you do that? You should have reported me. You should have gone straight to HR. Instead, you... He trailed off, shaking his head. I don't know, Maya said honestly. I spent all night trying to figure out why I did it. I kept thinking about all the people who would be hurt if this came out. Your family, Jessica, everyone who works here. I thought maybe if you had some time you could fix things quietly, without destroying everything. Fix things, Robert repeated. He walked to his desk and sank into his chair. Do you know how long this has been going on? Maya didn't answer. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. 4 months, Robert said. 4 months of lying to my wife, manipulating a young woman who works for me, risking everything I've built. And I kept telling myself I'd end it. Tomorrow I'd end it, but tomorrow never came. He looked up at Maya, and she was shocked to see tears in his eyes. You know what the worst part is? He said. I was relieved when you covered for me in there. For a second I thought maybe I could just keep going. Keep pretending, keep lying, because you'd given me an out. Maya sat down in the chair across from his desk. So what are you going to do? Robert was quiet for a long time. Outside his window, the city continued its busy rhythm. People going to lunch, making deals, living their lives. None of them knew that in this office a man was deciding who he wanted to be. I don't know, he finally said. But Maya, I need you to understand something. What you did for me, I don't deserve that kind of loyalty. You put your own career at risk to protect me from my own mistakes. I know, Maya said. If Douglas follows through with that HR complaint, they'll investigate. They'll recover deleted files. They'll find everything. And when they do, you'll be implicated too for covering it up. Maya had thought about this. She'd thought about it all night and all morning. I know that too. Robert leaned forward, his elbows on his desk. Then why? Help me understand why you'd risk everything for someone who's been acting like a complete fool. Maya thought about her answer carefully. Because I believe people can be better than their worst choices. And because sometimes the path to doing better starts with someone believing in you, even when you don't deserve it. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Robert said quietly, I'm going to end it with Jessica today, and I'm going to tell Anne. She deserves to know the truth. And the board? Maya asked. I don't know yet, Robert admitted. But I can't keep living like this. You showed me that last night, whether you meant to or not. You did the hard thing, the risky thing, because you thought it was right, and I've been taking the easy way out for months. Before Maya could respond, there was a knock on the door. Robert's assistant poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but Douglas Chen is online too. He says it's urgent. Robert and Maya exchanged a look. The day was far from over. Put him through, Robert said. Maya stood to leave, but Robert held up his hand. Stay, please. She sat back down as Robert picked up the phone, and as she listened to him navigate the conversation with Douglas, she realized something important. She hadn't just protected Robert from a scandal yesterday. She'd set in motion a series of events that neither of them could fully control. The question now was whether those events would lead to redemption or disaster. And Maya wouldn't know the answer until it was too late to change course. All she could do was hope that her gamble on human decency would pay off, because if it didn't, they were both going down together. Maya went home that evening with a headache that felt like someone was hammering nails into her skull. The conversation with Douglas had been tense, full of veiled threats and accusations. Robert had handled it well, staying calm and professional, but Maya could see the strain on his face. After the call ended, he'd told her to go home early. He needed time to think, he said. Time to figure out his next move. She'd wanted to stay to help somehow, but she knew there was nothing more she could do. This was Robert's choice to make now. She'd given him the opportunity. What he did with it was up to him. That night, Maya couldn't eat dinner. She made herself some tea and sat on her small apartment couch, staring at the wall. Her phone buzzed several times with messages from coworkers asking if she'd heard about the tension in the board meeting, but she didn't have the energy to respond. She just wanted this day to be over. She finally fell asleep around midnight, exhausted both physically and emotionally. But even in her dreams, she kept seeing Robert's face, Douglas's smug smile, and those terrible emails that had started everything. The next morning, Maya woke up to 17 missed calls. Her heart jumped into her throat. 17 calls before 7 in the morning couldn't be good news. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and saw they were from different people at work. Her fellow assistants, some managers, even a few people from other departments she barely knew. Something had happened. Something big. She quickly got dressed, not bothering with makeup or even breakfast. She just needed to get to the office and find out what was going on. The subway ride felt like it took forever. Maya kept checking her phone, but nobody had left detailed voicemails. Just frantic messages saying, "Call me back and have you heard?" When she finally got to Sterling Tower, the lobby was buzzing with people talking in hushed voices. Maya caught fragments of conversation as she rushed to the elevator. "Can you believe it? I never thought he'd actually... What's going to happen to the company?" Maya's hands were sweating as the elevator climbed to the 42nd floor. The doors opened and she stepped out into chaos. People were clustered in small groups talking urgently. Some looked shocked. Others looked worried. A few were even crying. Maya dropped her bag at her desk and grabbed the arm of Helen, one of the other executive assistants. "What happened? What's going on?" Helen's eyes were wide. "You don't know?" "Maya, Robert resigned. Last night. He sent an email to the entire board at 11 o'clock. The world seemed to tilt sideways. He what? He resigned as CEO, effective immediately. And that's not even the craziest part." Helen lowered her voice. "He confessed everything. The affair. The inappropriate relationship, all of it. He told the board he'd been having a relationship with Jessica Park and that he'd abused his position. He's taking full responsibility." Maya felt like she couldn't breathe. Robert had actually done it. He'd told the truth. He'd destroyed his own career to do the right thing. "Where is he?" Maya asked. "I don't know. Nobody's seen him this morning. But Patricia from HR is looking for you. She's been asking for you for the past hour." Maya's stomach dropped. Of course HR was looking for her. She'd lied in the board meeting yesterday. She'd deleted evidence. She was probably about to be fired, maybe even face legal consequences. "She's in the main conference room," Helen said, squeezing Maya's arm sympathetically. "Good luck." Maya walked to the conference room on legs that felt like rubber. Through the glass walls, she could see Patricia Williams sitting at the table. But she wasn't alone. There were 2 other people with her. One was a man in a suit that Maya didn't recognize. A lawyer, probably. And the other was Robert. Robert was here. He hadn't run away or disappeared. He was sitting in that conference room waiting for her. Maya took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and opened the door. All 3 of them looked up as she entered. Robert's eyes met hers, and she couldn't read his expression. Was he angry? Grateful? Regretful? "Maya, thank you for coming," Patricia said in her professional HR voice. "Please, sit down." Maya sat, placing her hands in her lap so no one would see them trembling. "I'm sure you've heard by now that Robert resigned last night," Patricia continued. "He's here this morning to handle some final matters. But before we proceed, there's something important we need to discuss." Here it comes, Maya thought. This is where they fire me. But then Robert spoke up. "Before you say anything else, Patricia, I need to make something clear. Maya had nothing to do with any of this. She didn't know about my relationship until very recently, and when she found out, she handled it with more integrity than I did. Maya stared at him. What was he doing? Patricia looked at Robert, then at Maya. Robert has informed us that you discovered evidence of his relationship and chose not to report it immediately. Is that accurate? Maya's mind raced. She could deny it. She could say Robert was lying to protect her. But what good would that do now? He'd already confessed everything. The truth was going to come out anyway. Yes, she said quietly. I found emails 2 nights ago. I should have reported them right away, but I didn't. I deleted them instead. The lawyer leaned forward. Why did you do that, Ms. Chen? Maya looked at Robert, then back at the lawyer. Because I thought if I gave him time, he might do the right thing on his own. And I was worried about what would happen to everyone else who works here if a scandal broke out right before the board meeting. So you obstructed an investigation to protect the company? The lawyer asked. No, Robert interrupted firmly. She didn't obstruct anything because there was no investigation at that time. And she didn't do it to protect the company. She did it because she believed I was capable of being better than my worst mistake. And she was right. Patricia looked between them, her expression unreadable. Then she said something Maya never expected. Robert has requested that you be promoted. Maya was certain she'd heard wrong. Excuse me? To Chief of Staff, Patricia continued. It's a newly created position. You'd be working directly with the interim CEO and the board, helping to manage the transition and maintain company stability during this difficult time. Maya couldn't speak. She just sat there, completely stunned. Robert leaned forward. Maya, what you did the other night taught me something I should have learned a long time ago. You saw me at my worst, and instead of exposing me, you gave me the chance to expose myself, to choose honesty over self-preservation. That took courage and wisdom, and the kind of judgment we need in leadership. But I lied, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. I covered it up. I deleted evidence. You gave me 24 hours to find my conscience, Robert said. And in those 24 hours, I called my wife and told her everything. I ended things with Jessica, and I wrote my resignation letter. If you'd reported me immediately, I would have panicked. I would have hired lawyers. I would have fought back and denied everything. But because you trusted me, I had the space to make the right choice. Patricia cleared her throat. The board has reviewed Robert's request and approved it. They believe that your actions, while unorthodox, demonstrated exactly the kind of sound judgment and discretion we need during this transition period. You'll receive a significant raise, full benefits, and a seat in senior leadership meetings. Maya felt tears prickling at her eyes. I don't understand. How is any of this happening? Because sometimes doing the right thing looks different than we expect, Robert said. You could have destroyed me. You had every reason to, every right to. But instead you did something harder. You believed I could be better. And that belief saved me from becoming someone I never want to be. The lawyer spoke up. There's one more thing, Ms. Chen. Robert has established a fund in your name, the Maya Chen Ethical Leadership Fund. It's designed to protect employees who report misconduct and to support ethical decision-making training throughout the company. Maya put her hand over her mouth. She couldn't believe this was real. It's $50,000 to start, Robert said, funded entirely from my personal accounts, and it will grow over time. Because what you did shouldn't be rare. It should be normal. People should feel safe to give others the chance to do the right thing, without fear of being punished for it. Patricia handed Maya a folder. These are the details of your new position, your compensation package, and the fund. Take the day to review everything. We'll need your answer by tomorrow. Maya took the folder with numb hands. This morning she'd thought she was going to be fired. Instead, she was being promoted and honored. It didn't make sense. The world had turned upside down. What about Jessica? Maya asked suddenly. What happens to her? Robert's face grew sad. She's being transferred to our West Coast office. Different department, different supervisor. No retaliation, no punishment. Just a fresh start away from this situation. It's what she wanted. And you? Maya asked. What will you do? I'm going to counseling, Robert said. Both individually and with my wife. If she'll have me. I've got a lot of work to do on myself. A lot of damage to repair. He paused. And I'm going to spend some time thinking about what kind of man I want to be. Thanks to you, I still have that chance. Patricia stood up. Why don't you take the rest of the day, Maya? This is a lot to process. Come back tomorrow and we'll go over everything in detail." Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She stood up on shaky legs and headed for the door. But before she left, Robert called out to her. "Maya." She turned back. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for seeing the person I could be instead of just the person I was being." Maya nodded and walked out of the conference room. The office was still buzzing with gossip and speculation. People were gathering around computers, probably reading Robert's resignation email. Some were crying. Others looked angry. Everyone was trying to figure out what this meant for their jobs, their futures, but Maya barely noticed any of it. She walked to her desk, picked up her bag, and headed for the elevator in a daze. As she rode down 42 floors, she tried to process everything that had just happened. She'd made a choice 2 nights ago. A choice that had kept her up at night, made her question everything she believed about right and wrong. And somehow, impossibly, it had led to this. Not to disaster, but to something she never could have predicted. Robert had chosen honesty. He'd chosen to blow up his own career rather than continue living a lie. And he'd done it because Maya had given him the space to make that choice freely, rather than forcing his hand. Was that really better than just reporting him immediately? Maya still wasn't entirely sure. But as she stepped out into the Chicago morning, she realized something important. Sometimes the path to doing the right thing isn't straight. Sometimes it winds and curves in unexpected directions. Sometimes it requires trusting people to be better than they're currently being. And sometimes, just sometimes, that trust pays off. Maya pulled out her phone and called her mother. When her mom answered, Maya said, "Hi, Mom. Something incredible just happened at work. Can I come over and tell you about it?" As she walked toward the subway, Maya allowed herself to smile for the first time in 2 days. She still didn't know if what she'd done was right. She probably never would know for certain. But she knew that Robert Hayes had been given a second chance, and he'd used it to choose integrity over self-preservation. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Tomorrow, she'd start her new job. Tomorrow, she'd begin helping the company navigate through this difficult transition. Tomorrow, she'd have to face the whispers and the questions and the judgment from people who thought she should have reported Robert immediately. But today, she was just going to go see her parents and tell them that their daughter had been promoted, that all those years of teaching her to believe in people, to see the good in others, to give second chances had paid off in a way none of them could have imagined. The world was messy. People were complicated. Right and wrong weren't always clear, but kindness, Maya was learning, had power. The power to change minds, the power to inspire better choices, the power to transform disaster into redemption, and that was a lesson worth learning, no matter how hard the path to get there had been. 3 weeks later, Maya sat in what used to be a storage room but was now her office. It wasn't as big as Robert's old corner office, but it had a window and a door that closed, which was more than she'd ever had before. Her new title was printed on a nameplate outside. Maya Chen, Chief of Staff. Every time she walked past it, she still felt a little jolt of disbelief, but the nameplate was about the only easy part of her new job. The first week had been brutal. The news of Robert's resignation had spread through the company like wildfire, and with it came all kinds of stories. Some people painted Robert as a victim who'd been forced out by corporate politics. Others called him a predator who'd gotten off too easy. And Maya found herself caught in the middle of all of it. Not everyone was happy about her promotion. In fact, a lot of people weren't happy about it at all. On her 3rd day in the new role, Maya had walked into the break room to get coffee, and the conversation had stopped dead. 5 people had been talking, and the moment they saw her, they went silent. She'd gotten her coffee and left, but she'd heard the whispers start up again before the door even closed behind her. Can you believe they promoted her? She must have known about it the whole time. Probably helped him cover it up. Maya had stood in the hallway, coffee cup in hand, and felt her eyes sting with tears. But she'd blinked them back, straightened her shoulders, and gone back to her office. She couldn't control what people thought. She could only control how she did her job, and her job was overwhelming. The interim CEO was a woman named Linda Torres, who'd been brought in from the board of directors. Linda was brilliant and efficient, but she didn't know the day-to-day operations of Brightline like Robert had. That's where Maya came in. She was supposed to be the bridge between the old regime and the new one, helping Linda navigate the company culture and understand how things really worked. It meant 12-hour days. It meant answering questions she didn't always have answers to. It meant making decisions that affected hundreds of people's lives. And it meant facing the judgment of coworkers who thought she didn't deserve to be there. One afternoon, Maya was in a meeting with the senior leadership team when Kevin Harris, the head of operations, made a comment that stopped everyone in their tracks. "With all due respect," Kevin said, not sounding respectful at all, "I'm not sure why we're taking strategic advice from someone who was filing papers 3 weeks ago. No offense, Maya, but you were hired to be an assistant, not a leader." The room went silent. Maya felt her face grow hot. Linda started to say something, but Maya held up her hand. "You're right, Kevin," Maya said calmly, even though her heart was racing. 3 weeks ago, I was an executive assistant, and I was good at it. I learned this company from the ground up. I know which clients are happy and which ones are on the verge of leaving. I know which employees are burned out and which ones are ready to step up. I know where the problems are because I've been watching them develop for 3 years. She looked around the table at the other executives. I didn't ask for this promotion. I didn't scheme for it or manipulate my way into it. I was given this role because when I saw something wrong, I handled it in a way that gave people the chance to do better. And I'll keep handling things that way, whether you respect me or not. Kevin had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. The meeting continued, but Maya noticed that people started actually listening to her suggestions after that. Standing up for herself had been scary, but it had been necessary. Still, not every day brought small victories. Some days were just hard, like the day Bethany Cooper cornered her in the parking garage. Bethany was a senior account manager who'd worked at Brightline for almost a decade. She was respected, well-liked, and had apparently been one of Jessica's mentors. "I need to talk to you," Bethany said, stepping in front of Maya's car. Maya's stomach tightened. "Okay. What you did was wrong," Bethany said bluntly. "You found out that a man in power was taking advantage of a young woman, and instead of protecting her, you protected him." "That's not what happened," Maya said quietly. "Isn't it? Jessica is 26 years old. Robert is 53. He's the CEO. She couldn't say no to him, not really. And you gave him time to manipulate the situation, to control the narrative, to make it look like they were both equally responsible." Maya felt sick. She'd thought about this too late at night when she couldn't sleep. Had she protected a predator? Had she put her own interests ahead of Jessica's well-being? "I talked to Jessica," Maya said. "After everything came out. She told me the relationship was consensual. She said she made her own choices." "Of course she said that," Bethany shot back. "What else could she say? If she admits she felt pressured, she looks weak. If she says it was consensual, at least she keeps some dignity. But either way, she's the one who had to transfer. She's the one whose reputation is damaged, not him. He gets to be the reformed sinner who owned up to his mistakes. She's just the other woman." Maya didn't have a good answer for that, because Bethany was right, at least partially. Jessica had paid a price too, even though Robert had taken public responsibility. "You're right," Maya said finally. "I can't fix what happened to Jessica, but I can make sure we have better policies in place so this doesn't happen to someone else. I can make sure people feel safe reporting problems without fear of retaliation. That's what I'm trying to do." Bethany studied her for a long moment. "I hope so, because right now, a lot of women in this company are watching you, and they're wondering if you'll actually protect them, or if you'll only protect the powerful people who give you promotions." She walked away, leaving Maya standing alone in the parking garage. That conversation haunted Maya for days. But slowly things started to change. Maya threw herself into her work, determined to prove that she deserved her new role. She implemented new reporting procedures for harassment and misconduct. She started a mentorship program, pairing junior employees with senior leaders. She held town hall meetings where anyone could ask questions or raise concerns anonymously. And she worked on the Maya Chen Ethical Leadership Fund. Robert had seeded it with $50,000, but Maya wanted it to be more than just his gesture of guilt. She recruited other executives to contribute. She set up a committee to decide how the money would be used. She made sure the fund had real teeth, real impact. One afternoon, about 6 weeks into her new role, a young man named David Kim came to her office. He was a junior analyst, barely 24 years old, and he looked terrified. "I need to report something," he said, his voice shaking. "But I'm scared I'll lose my job." Maya closed her door and sat down across from him. "Tell me what's going on." David told her about his supervisor, a man who'd been with the company for 15 years. The supervisor had been falsifying client reports, hiding losses, and blaming mistakes on his team members. David had proof, but he was afraid to come forward, because the supervisor was friends with several board members. "If I report this, they'll fire me," David said. "They'll say I'm a troublemaker. They'll make sure I never work in this industry again." Maya looked at this young man who reminded her so much of herself a few months ago, scared and trying to do the right thing despite the risks. "Here's what we're going to do," she said. "You're going to give me all your evidence. I'm going to investigate this personally with HR and our legal team. We're going to keep your identity protected. And if anyone retaliates against you in any way, the ethics fund will cover your salary for 6 months while you find another job. You'll be protected." David's eyes filled with tears. "Really? You'd do that?" "That's what the fund is for," Maya said. "To protect people who do the right thing even when it's hard." The investigation David triggered led to the supervisor being fired and 2 board members being asked to step down for overlooking the misconduct. It was messy and complicated, but it was handled properly, and David kept his job. Word spread. People started coming to Maya with problems they'd been too scared to report before. Slowly, cautiously, people began to trust that the company really was trying to change. Not everyone changed their mind about Maya. Kevin from operations still made snide comments in meetings sometimes. Bethany still looked at her with suspicion in the hallways. Some people would probably always see her as someone who'd protected a powerful man at the expense of what was right. But others started to see something different. They saw someone who'd made a complicated choice in an impossible situation, and then worked to make things better afterward. They saw someone who'd been given power, and used it to protect the vulnerable instead of the powerful. One day Maya got an email that made her cry at her desk. It was from Jessica Park, the woman at the center of everything that had happened. The email was short. "I heard about what you're doing with the ethics program. I heard about David Kim and how you protected him. Thank you for making something good come out of what happened. I don't know if you made the right choice that night when you found those emails. I'm honestly not sure there was a right choice. But I know you're making the right choices now. That's what matters." Maya read that email 3 times. Then she saved it in a folder labeled Reminders for days when she doubted herself. 2 months into her new role, Linda called Maya into her office. Maya had learned to read Linda's expressions by now, and she could tell this was serious. "We've had an interesting development," Linda said, gesturing for Maya to sit. "Robert has been doing consulting work. Apparently, he's been talking to companies about ethical leadership and rebuilding after scandals. And he's been recommending they implement programs like the one you've built here." Maya wasn't sure how to feel about that. "Is that a problem?" "No," Linda said. "Actually, it's generating interest. 3 other companies have reached out to us asking about licensing our ethics program framework. They want to implement similar systems." Maya sat up straighter. "Really? Really? What you've built here is becoming a model, not just within this company, but beyond it." Linda smiled slightly. "You've turned our worst scandal into our best innovation. That's remarkable." As Maya walked back to her office, she thought about how strange life was. 3 months ago, she'd been an assistant who'd stumbled onto information that could have destroyed everything. She'd made a choice that could have gone terribly wrong. And instead, through a combination of luck, hard work, and people choosing to be better than their worst moments, something good had emerged. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still people who distrusted her. There were still problems to solve. Jessica had still been hurt. Robert's family had still been through trauma. The consequences of his actions hadn't magically disappeared. But Maya had learned something important. Perfection wasn't possible. You couldn't make choices that left everyone happy and no one hurt. Life was messy and complicated and full of impossible decisions. What you could do was keep trying. Keep working to make things better. Keep believing that people were capable of change. Keep using whatever power you had to protect the people who needed protecting. Maya sat at her desk and opened her laptop. She had 3 meetings that afternoon, 2 policy proposals to review, and a presentation to prepare for the board. Her old life as an assistant seemed like it had been lived by a different person, but she was still the same Maya who'd sat in an empty office on a Tuesday night, looking at emails that would change everything. She'd just learned that sometimes the consequences of your choices take time to unfold. And sometimes if you're very lucky and work very hard, those consequences